Here we go.
You are about to experience the Skip Bayless Show, brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. First up, we're going to go Micah. We're going to go Shedeur. We're going to go Taylor and Travis and all of that. And finally, I will get to my final thoughts, my biggest takeaways from this Cowboys documentary and what it meant to me and to my career. But first up, Micah Parsons, still unsigned. I am surprised, pleasantly so. Jerry's MO has always been Monday or Tuesday of the week before the week. You just get it done. You cave in, you overpay. You hug and kiss with your superstar that you'd been at odds with throughout training camp. You chuckle that you got all the international publicity and milked it for all it was worth throughout training camp and kept your superstar out of harm's way through training camp. And now you ramp up for the regular season. And as our new head coach, our new puppet coach, Brian Schottenheimer, said yesterday, it's going to now require some ramping up for Micah when he does get signed, because you can't just throw him into opening night at Philadelphia against the defending champs on banner raising night and expect him to play the full 75 plays on defense, because he hasn't practiced at all. He has been holding in. He's been around. He's been in his jersey. He's been through walkthroughs. He's been through meetings. He's up to speed on all the mental, but on zero of the physical. And what concerns me now as the clock ticks toward Philadelphia is that from what I know, what I gather, what I instinctively sort of feel about Micah, I don't consider him any kind of workout warrior. So I'm not sure exactly what kind of weight room, exercise bike, treadmill kind of shape he's been able to stay in outside of being able to practice and play football. All concerning to me, but I still am holding out hope that Jerry Jones finally, for once, has seen the light. Again, I don't think Micah is remotely worth the most money ever paid to a defensive player ever. I can't see it. I have beaten that to death for you. I have demonstrated that for you again and again and again. And my biggest chuckle came late last night when I noticed on X, formerly known as Twitter, a runaway story, a wildfire spreading like story that it's a done deal that Micah Parsons has been traded to Green Bay for, I think the runaway speculation was 2 1s, a 2 and a 3, and that on the table was already $45 million a year for 4 years or whatever it was. All of it almost certainly baloney. I don't think this was a question of where there's some smoke, there's got to be fire. I think it detonated from a tweet from the ex-Packer who played for the Packers for 9 years, retired in 2017, John Kuhn, their fullback, you'll recall. He was a good player, made 3 Pro Bowls and 1 first-team All-Pro. But I think it all started when he tweeted Micah freaking Parsons. That was it. And somehow Packer Nation leaped to the conclusion he's ours. And again, to my point about Micah Parsons, well, thank you. Take him off our hands then. Because the great irony of that was, as I tweeted very late last night, hey, Green Bay, just put in the tape of your last playoff game against Dallas at Dallas, obviously a couple of years back. You remember that nightmare of a debacle. Micah Parsons, I think, played in that game. I had to look back at the participation chart to make sure he did play in the game, because against Green Bay in the playoff game, he registered his worst stats of his career, meaning he had virtually no stats for the entire game. He ghosted his own defense. He no-showed his entire team. That defense was largely to blame for Green Bay 27, Dallas nothing before halftime. I'm pretty sure Micah did play in that game. And then as I went off on, speaking of that cowboy documentary on Netflix, you get to see a candid shot in the final and 8th episode of Jerry Jones in the locker room, rubbing elbows with all of his players, especially his great-grandson, Micah, the cowboy he loves the most. He sidles over to him and sort of whispers in his ear, no matter what happened out there, it wasn't your fault. What? It was largely his fault, Jerry. What are you talking about? It's the Cowboy Country Club. This is what's wrong with the Dallas Cowboys. Nobody is held accountable. Well, I'm holding him accountable. In Green Bay, if you're really thinking about trading for him, you should have held him accountable for that game. I remember another game going back to Micah's second year at Green Bay. It was an Aaron Rodgers game. Remember the overtime? Aaron always killed the Cowboys. He didn't kill many teams, but he killed the Cowboys. I think he won his MVPs off Cowboy games. He was born to beat the Dallas Cowboys, to destroy the Dallas Cowboys. And in that game, that was the first game I began to question. They were moving Micah all up. They had him playing pass defense. They had him running with receivers all the way down to the goal line. And the next day on TV, I was just out of my mind. What are you doing with Micah Parsons? Well, clearly they were already of a mind that he can't play the run. So maybe we should move him around, make him some kind of like a monster back like Charles Haley started out in San Francisco as kind of a roaming linebacker / strong safety, a disruptor. Green Bay, really? Are you sure about Micah Parsons? And then my final conclusion last night on X was, wait a second. Why would Jerry Jones even consider trading Micah Parsons right now? Because he's got him. It's not like one of those situations where the player is playing out his option and he's going to become a free agent. It doesn't really work like that because in this sport, thanks to the NFL's collective bargaining agreement, there's this thing called the franchise tag. So right here, right now, this is how I would play the situation. I'll say it again. I would just I would have told him several weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, I need to see more. I would have said it publicly. I need to see more. I want you to play out your final year of your rookie deal. What is it? It's somewhere between 22 and 24 million. I think there are various clauses and things, but it's somewhere in the low 20s. It's not terrible money. Who wouldn't want that? But have him play out that year, and then you have this thing called the franchise tag. You can strap it on him, and you can strap it on him a second year. You have Micah Parsons for 3 years. Why would Jerry Jones want to part with Micah Parsons right now when he's got him right where he wants him, able to put the biggest chip on his shoulder pads you could put on there? You could just say, I don't believe you. I know you're pretty good. I need you to be very good. And if you show me you're very good, then I'll pay you the most money ever paid to a defensive player. But I need you to prove yourself first, because he hasn't. Again, 5th in sacks since he came into the league. 5th in hits on the quarterback since he came into the league. And finally, speaking of those playoffs, think about this, about Micah Parsons. He's played 4 playoff games, and he has 1 sack that came with 1 minute and 29 seconds left in what had become a blowout Cowboy win, a rare Cowboy playoff win, at Tampa against the 8-9 Buccaneers, then led by the last hurrah that was 45-year-old Tom Brady. So Micah, late in that game, it was, 31-14. I think that was the score. It's a wipeout. And with 1:29 left and Tom Brady having no other choice but to just keep dropping back and throwing it, snap it to me and I'll fire it. He's beat up. they've been all over him the whole game, and Micah got loose one time with 129 left and registered his only sack in 4 playoff games. He no-showed at home against San Francisco. He didn't put up any numbers at all, even though the defense played pretty well at San Francisco when they lost that game. And then that nightmare of a debacle of a eyesore of a game against Green Bay at home when Dallas had, what was it? I forget the number. It was like 8 or 9 Pro Bowlers, at least 7. And Green Bay, the youngest team in the playoffs that year, had none. Dallas was a 7-point favorite, 2 seed. Happy days are here again, and that's what happened because Micah no-showed. I mean, come on, man. And now my only fear is this is dragging on, which is good news for me, but bad news in that he's going to play for the Cowboys, but how is he going to get ready to play for the Cowboys? I don't know what's going on here, but once we missed the Monday, Tuesday, I was predicting that's Jerry's history. They'll get it done by Tuesday. Nope, no, they didn't. Maybe they're negotiating away as we speak. Jerry's history is he'll cave in. I still, that little voice deep down in my psyche says this will get done today or tomorrow. They'll hug each other and Michael will be absurdly overpaid. But I do have one other hope here. And the weird part of this is that Micah should also see what a great spot he is in Dallas, even if he played for less money than the most ever. Think about this. The strength of the Dallas Cowboys this year will be starting receiver, those 2 receivers, CD and Pickens. And the pass rush is a quiet, sort of silent strength. We got Dante Fowler back from Washington. He led them with 10.5 sacks. They are going to miss him. We are going to welcome him back because I think he's still got a lot of gas left in the tank. And when I look down this list, I told you, Ezra Ruwaka, I think he will still prove to be, he didn't flash much in the preseason. He's going to be a steal of a second rounder, and I think he will disrupt this year. Sam Williams is back, and I saw flashes of his ability to disrupt. That James Houston won the preseason for the Dallas Cowboys, and he is on the roster, and he will contribute as a pass rusher. Odigizua as a defensive tackle I think he's better at rushing the passer than stopping the run, which is horrifying, but true. And if I throw on top of that Micah Parsons, even if he's on a pitch count, 40 plays on defense, I don't know. As Schottenheimer said, can he still disrupt? Yep, he still can. I think he could just step out there right now and disrupt, especially if he could trust that he wasn't always double teamed. And I'm not sure you can always double team Micah with this group, because if you double Micah, somebody is going to wreck your game. I haven't seen Micah wreck a game since his rookie year. That's what scares me the most about him. But man, that's a deep group. And Micah, just accept your fate here. It's a great place. You're playing for America's team at their deepest defensive position, and the onus won't be all on you. This is the year you could shine. If this becomes your contract year where you've got to prove it to Jerry Jones on the final year of your rookie deal, enjoy. You can. This is made to order for you. This is almost set up for you to have a huge year, because it is now going to be very difficult to double team Micah Parsons. The clock ticks. Jerry. Okay, before I proceed, FanDuel's getting you ready for the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. 5 for $300. That's right. Pick a bet. Bet $5. And if it wins, you will unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. You can build parlays, you can bet player props, you can ride the live lines. Whatever your style, FanDuel has you covered. The NFL season is upon us. The only question is, are you ready to play? If you are, why don't you visit FanDuel.com/skip right here, right now. That's FanDuel.com/skip, my first name, SKIP, to download the FanDuel app today and get you started. So, cheers. The shock to me about Shedeur Sanders now being the third string quarterback for the Cleveland Browns was that so much was made out of unbelievable. He actually made the team as the third string quarterback. Like that was a big deal. Like that was somewhat of a surprise to a lot of people. He should have been the first pick in the draft. Surprised that he made the roster? Are you kidding me? Obviously, the NFL tried to teach him and his father a lesson. You don't act like that. You don't talk like that before a draft. We'll show you how our game is played. We will watch you plummet all the way. I think he would have gone undrafted except for that owner in Cleveland. And he is the key to everything because he is something of an against-the-grain maverick owner. He's kind of a wannabe Jerry. And especially with quarterbacks, see Deshaun Watson, he'll just crazy plunge. And I think because he had a pre-draft dinner with Shedeur and Dion, he likes the kid. He's got it in the back of his mind. Maybe this kid is as good as Mel Kiper and Skip Bayless say. Maybe he is. He's sure popular. Is he ever? Did you see the TV ratings for that first preseason game that Shedeur lucked into playing because everybody else on the roster got hurt? Did you see the numbers? Biggest preseason TV ratings numbers in 10 years for that game because of Shedeur. He's got a following. I might be driving that bandwagon. I'm his biggest fan because I believe in Shedeur Sanders. I believe in his mental and physical clutch toughness. I believe in his deadly accuracy. I believe in his bloodlines. I believe in his father with all my heart and soul. I believe that father taught son that you are the best at what you do. Shedeur grew up around all-time greatness, and it has rubbed off on him. Sometimes to a fault, he gets a little too full of himself, but he believes with all his heart and soul that he is destined for greatness. You can't teach that. You can't coach that. You can't buy that. He fell into Cleveland's lap because Jimmy Haslam wanted a publicity splash. It was mostly a publicity stunt to say, oh, he's fallen all the way here? Yeah, I know we took Dylan Gabriel because Jimmy Haslam, the owner, had nothing to do with Dylan Gabriel. That was Andrew Berry, the GM. That was the head coach, Kevin Stefanski. They love Dylan Gabriel, and that's going to be Shedeur's ongoing problem in Cleveland. They love him. They took him 50 slots higher in the third round than they took Shedeur in the fifth round at 144 overall. 144th. Shameful. Disgusting. Despicable. 144th. But my point is that it felt like and sounded like it was Jimmy Haslam who overruled the coaching staff and the front office staff and said, look, this Kenny Pickett, yeah, we traded for him. Let's get him out of the way. He's irrelevant. We got Flacco. He's 40 years of age. He's respectable. He'll make us respectable on opening day against the Cincinnati Bengals. But let's just get rid of Pickett now. Let's just get him out of the way. And they did. They traded him to the Raiders, and it opened a new door for Shedeur, obviously. He moved up one slot on the depth chart. The beauty of it is, I was afraid he would get no reps and no run the rest of the year. And now, at least, I think he will get all of the snaps when he runs the scout team on, and teams do it differently, probably Wednesday. He'll probably get all the scout team snaps against the first team defense. That will be gold for Shedeur. He obviously needs that, but that will continue to give him the opportunity to rise and shine, at least behind closed doors in practice, for a coaching staff that never wanted him in the first place, for a front office staff that still doesn't want him in the first place. So that's a plus. And then obviously going into next year could be a plus, because training camp next year could be an open competition between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. But maybe by next year, if this year goes the way I think it will, Browns having the worst odds to reach the Super Bowl in the NFL, so hence, translation, worst team in the NFL. I kind of like some of their talent, but they're going to have a hard time. Joe Flacco will have a hard time. I just hope they don't somehow get off to a big, hot, crazy, unexpected start with a big opening day upset of Joe Burrow and company. I like the Bengals a lot. I'm actually leaning toward picking the Bengals by next week to win it all in the AFC. I'm leaning that way. But again, Flacco's not bad. Flacco has been much better in the playoffs than he has been in the regular season, when he's been mostly Joe Fluco. But I'm hoping, I'm going to, obviously be rooting like mad against the Cleveland Browns to lose, because if you get, I don't know, if you get midway, 9 games? What if they're 0-9? Haslam's going to say, just play the kids. And just because he went in the third round, Dillon Gabriel will get the first shot, and maybe Shedeur would get a shot down the line in the last 2-3 games. I don't know. To play some real football with real first-team players. I'm telling you, if you give this kid a shot, he will shine. Shedeur Sanders is better than Dillon Gabriel. And I like Dillon Gabriel, and I watched him very closely for 2 years when he played for the school. I grew up loving the University of Oklahoma. I watched every snap. I know what he is. He's a little better than Tua, and that's saying a lot. But he is not better than Shedeur Sanders. He doesn't have it. He's a little bit of an undersized overachiever, and he will play with all of his heart and all of his guts, and he will battle. As he said, I'm a competitor. He is. He can move around a little bit. He's got a nice arm, but he doesn't have Shedeur's arm. I know people rip Shedeur's arm, and I don't get it, because Shedeur's got a Brady-esque arm. When he needs the velocity, it's there. When he needs the deep ball, he can throw it just as far as anybody else can. When it's time to make the clutch 3rd and 8 throw, he can make it. Can Shedeur Sanders? Obviously, I'm rooting like mad for him. And I think his only hope right now is that Jimmy Haslam loves publicity. He loves to make a splash. And he knows deep down that the biggest splash he could make this year, and especially next year, is with Shedeur Sanders. If they fall to that 0-9 range, I'm just hoping, and this sounds ugly, but I'm just not a Stefanski fan. I hope that there's some house cleaning in Cleveland. I hope that Shedeur gets to start next year with a new coaching staff, maybe even a new front office, that would be more open-minded to how great he can be. All right. Now, a quick thought about the biggest story times 1,000 in sports. her and him. You know who and you know who. I don't even need to say their names anymore. You know, Cinderella and Prince Charming. So they're getting married. Way to go. Congratulations. But this is just me from a distance. I don't know anything about this. I hope they're madly, deeply in love forever and ever. I do. I hope that. But everything always comes off with both of them, especially her, as so staged and so scripted, so inauthentic, so unspontaneous. So he popped the question. Now, I think she popped the question several weeks back. This has obviously been in the works, been carefully planned by her people, telling his people what's going to happen. There were like 10 tons of flowers in the backyard, carefully staged. The pictures carefully staged. She orchestrates all of the above. She has carefully orchestrated her rise in her field. And she is a super duper star of the highest magnitude. I'm not the biggest fan of her songs, of her voice. I'm just not. I tried and I failed to love her as a performer, as a singer. But that's irrelevant to this. What I do admire is she is so in charge of her life. It is so carefully plotted that it felt like she even chose her partner. Oh, he's a big star on the most popular team in football. I'll become a football fan because that's one of the biggest audiences in the world. I'll do that. I'll go to games because every time he does anything, they'll show me and I can cheer and I can hug and I can scream and I can dance up in the box. It's such great publicity for her and obviously scratches his back too with his podcast and all of his media endeavors, all of his acting. It's all there for him in large part because of her. And it's coming across now like it's this real life fairy tale, but it's like they're scripting a movie in real time. We're watching a movie in real time because the world needs a real life Cinderella and a real life Prince Charming. And the fairy tale unfolds right before your very eyes because she's scripting it and she's really, really smart at scripting. It's a sight to behold. So carefully plotted, so carefully presented on social media. All the pictures, way to go. Congratulations. She is amazing because she is orchestrating. If there's such a thing as wearing the pants in a relationship, she does. Now, before I proceed, you can secure your privacy, speaking of the internet, with Surfshark. I love that name, Surfshark. Go to surfshark.com/my last name, Bayless, or you can just use Bayless for 4 extra months of Surfshark. 4 extra. You'll find the URL and the code in the show notes. And don't forget, it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Browse with complete protection. Protect your data. Explore the web securely. There's no greater peace of mind than that because Surfshark works. Okay. Now allow me this, please, if you will. If you've watched all or part of this Netflix docuseries on the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, the gambler and his Cowboys, buckle up now because I'm about to unleash on it. And I'm not sure there's anyone out there in better position to unleash on it because I was the only one who was inside all of it, but objectively inside it, as in 1 foot in and always 1 foot out, an outsider on the inside, if you will, giving me the best perspective to see the big picture that Jerry and Jimmy and Troy and Barry and Michael and Emmett and Dion and Charles Haley just couldn't step back and focus on. So if you've seen the doc, you know I serve as a sort of narrator commentator through all of the 8 episodes because I did write 3 books that went way behind the scenes with the Dallas Cowboys, books that came out in 1990 and 1993, and finally in 1996. Was I ever blessed to be at the rightest place at the rightest time? Whew. Because as you see in the doc, those teams through the 90s were the most controversial and fascinating teams in the history of sports. That is the objective truth. I dare you to tell me otherwise. So now I'm about to share with you my biggest, strongest, deepest conclusions after I carefully watched this doc. So first, allow me to say that my final takeaway was just to sit back and smile and shake my head. I cannot begin to express to you how much negativity I withstood from fans and from media when each of my 3 books first came out. You want to talk about controversial? Whew. And now talk about vindication and validation. Look, I realize nobody in the world cares about this but me, but this entire documentary vindicates and validates what I was the first to report in each of those 3 books. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. I reported what nobody was ready to hear at that moment. In each case, I wasn't right on time. I was actually ahead of my time in all 3 cases, as you can see in the doc. My first book was called God's Coach. It was about the rise and the fall of Thomas Wade Landry, leading to Jerry Jones buying the team and firing Coach Landry. And as you probably know, Coach Landry wasn't just revered in Cowboy Nation, he was worshipped. And for me to report that in those final 3 years of Landry, he was just losing it, forgetting plays and players' names during games, well, Cowboy Nation just wasn't ready to read that. Fans weren't ready to hear that owner Bum Bright despised Tom Landry, despised him so much, the Landry who wouldn't even give Bright the time of night at Christmas parties, that Bum Bright chose by far the lowest bid for the Dallas Cowboys because the lowest and least qualified bidder, Jerry Jones, the outsider, was the only bidder who said he'd fire Tom Landry. That's the only way Jerry bought it, is that he lucked into saying, oh, I don't want to go forward with Tom Landry. And for me, this is the only in Dallas irony of this whole tale, is that Jerry Jones told Bum Bright he was bringing in his good friend Jimmy Johnson to coach the Cowboys, the same Jimmy that Jerry would soon be calling that motherfucker, as he does in the documentary. Only in Dallas. Much of what I first reported in God's Coach is in this doc, but the media pretty much scoffed at God's Coach. They hadn't reported it, so it couldn't be true. And by the way, God's Coach was my favorite of my 3 books. it's the inside truth from start to finish about that entire franchise history. Allow me to say this, I'm just not sure I'm capable of reporting and writing at a higher level than I did in God's Coach. But the other two books had bigger, better stories to tell. But before I leave God's Coach, understand, I spent so much time interviewing Jerry Jones for God's Coach that I got to know him before most of the media did. Maybe all the media did. I really got to know him. And I must admit, I liked him. And I think I was the only media member in Dallas who began to predict in my newspaper columns that Jerry Jones, who was ridiculed in those days as Jethro Jones, the hick from the Arkansas Sticks, that Gerald Wayne Jones would do great things in Dallas. I was a proponent of Jerry's. I was a defender. I campaigned that this was going to work because Jerry was going to drive it home. And did he ever? So my biggest takeaway on Jerry Jones is that I can't help it. I still like the heck out of him. He obviously can be just runaway egomaniacal, as you see in the doc. He's turned into a stubborn old coot, just irrationally stubborn. And he's obviously the owner who will never, ever fire his general manager himself. And Jerry, weirdly but truly, does not know or get football. I'm sorry, that's the truth. Yet, in the end, it's hard for me not to like Jerry Jones, who has the best and biggest heart of anyone in that documentary. And in the end, is weirdly the most likable figure in that doc, although Barry Switzer is a close second. So, before I knew it, my publisher of my first book, Simon & Schuster, was asking me to do a second book, a season inside a team that was just on the verge. You just knew it was on the verge, a very talented but too young team, the 1992 Dallas Cowboys. And guess what that book turned into? It sort of wrote itself. It ran away from me. It turned into Jerry versus Jimmy behind the scenes. I was there. That book was ironically titled The Boys. Not really. That book ends with a prediction that the town wasn't big enough for the both of them, that they wouldn't last much longer together, that either Jerry would fire Jimmy or Jimmy would just up and quit. Of course, that 92 team broke through a year early and won the Super Bowl. And now I was coming out with a book that predicted the owner would fire the head coach. A book that was competing in bookstores with that head coach's. Ain't I a great book about how he had turned everything around from 1-15. In fact, his book, Jimmy's book, was called Turning the Thing Around. What? Lord have mercy on me. Cowboy Nation was not happy with me. None of this had been reported until I reported it, even though everything I wrote in that book was dead on the money. You can see it now. Nobody wanted to see it then. Nobody wanted to hear it then. Nobody. Even my book editor initially took exception with my opening scene in that book. You can check it out if you so desire. But it was Jerry blowing through the locker room door after the final regular season game of 1992. Just as Jimmy was addressing the team, here came Jerry leading Prince Bandar, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States. Prince Bandar and his entire entourage, including all the security, right through the door and into the post-game locker room. And my opening scene had Jimmy stopping in mid-sentence as he spoke to the team and storming out of the locker room and throwing a fit and threatening to quit right then and there, and finally cursing out Jerry later that evening at a post-game gathering for coaches upstairs in the stadium. Cursed him out. all that happened before the 92 playoffs even got started. I'm just not sure my editor really ever believed it was that bad between Jimmy and Jerry. My editor initially wanted me to lead that book with Jimmy blowing up at the team on the plane coming back from a December loss in Washington, a story that had already been reported, but one that added fuel to the blazing legend that had become Jimmy Johnson, the national legend of Jimmy Johnson. At that point, Jimmy was at least as big a national star as Troy or Emmett or Michael had become up to that point as they first broke through. But my editor was sure right about one thing. Cowboy Nation did not want to hear anything about Jimmy versus Jerry, even though I just knew that was the story. But Cowboy Nation's reaction to the boys was, what? This is more outlandish shock jock lies from Skip Bayless. It got so bad for me after that book came out in July, just ahead of the next year's training camp, the 93 training camp, that around, I don't know, is the 1st of September, I was on the Sunday morning show on ESPN, the Sports Reporters, Dick Schaap show, the late, great Dick. When on air, I reiterated that I just doubted Jimmy and Jerry would last much longer. And in the next commercial break, my producer came on the speaker that everyone in the studio could hear and just, with a booming voice of God, just called me out, just laughed at me in front of everybody, said I was crazy if I truly believed Jerry Jones was going to fire the hottest coach in pro football, Jimmy Johnson. What is wrong with you? And I shrugged and I said, I know what I've seen. I had seen Jimmy ban me from all Cowboy facilities for daring to give Jerry any credit in my book. And by the way, I definitely gave Jerry credit for ramrodding that trade with the 49ers for Charles Haley, a trade Jimmy was hesitant to make because he feared Charles was just uncoachable. As I said in that book, and as everybody says now, no way the Cowboys win that Super Bowl without Charles Haley. And now Troy Aikman, as he said the other night on Monday Night Football, he says that he wouldn't have any of his 3 rings without Charles Haley. I second that emotion. And on opening day of camp in 1993, I had seen Jerry make a beeline right past Jimmy standing out in the middle of the practice field and come straight over to me standing on the sidelines and say to me, as long as I own this team, you will be welcome in all of our facilities. That's what Jerry Jones said to me. Yes, sir, I had seen Jerry show Jimmy who was boss in full view of all the players and many media members standing along the sideline. But of course, the Cowboys won a second straight Super Bowl in 1993, and I guess I looked like a complete idiot for a little while until shortly thereafter at the league meetings, Jerry decided he'd finally had enough of Jimmy's ridicule and scorn, and he fired his ass. Look, this is just me. Final takeaway, Jimmy's a scoundrel. He's a con artist. He's a media deceiver. In the end, deep down, not a nice guy. I didn't think the documentary went quite deeply enough into how many times in front of assistant coaches and other front office staffers, Jimmy just shamed Jerry to his face, just shamed him for trying to play GM and for taking credit and for doing so many interviews. Jimmy could not stand it that he had paid his coaching dues starting as an assistant at Picayune, Mississippi High School, and that Jerry had struck it rich and bought his way into owning and operating an NFL team. Really, owning and operating the NFL team. Look, I certainly appreciated that from Jimmy. I got it. But here's what Jimmy really couldn't live with. This is it. This is the crux. as long as he coached the Dallas Cowboys, he would have a boss. He was never going to be the boss. And Jimmy could only shame that boss so many times, especially in front of assistant coaches that Jerry admired and wanted to kind of be part of that assistant coach fraternity, one of the boys. Look, I said many times that Jimmy Johnson could create a locker room force field unlike any coach I have ever been around, and I've been around a bunch of great ones. Jimmy could create a force field out of which championships could spring, create a force field that kept players on razor's edge because they were scared to death of Jimmy's psycho temper. He could create a force field that was finite, that might have lasted maybe a couple of more years in Dallas because, look, that force field was going to burn him out along with all the players and all the coaches and everyone else around Hurricane Jimmy. It was going to be finite, and maybe it had already run its course after 2 Super Bowls. But here's the point. I'll say this again. Jimmy's football acumen wasn't all that much greater than Jerry's. Jimmy didn't believe in Troy Aikman for the first 3 years he had him. First 3 years, Jimmy drafted Steve Walsh #1 in the supplemental draft. Jimmy stuck with Steve Berline at quarterback down the stretch of the 91 season and into the playoffs, even after Troy Aikman got healthy. Norv Turner was Jimmy's 8th attempt to hire a new offensive coordinator, and it was Norv, who was only the receivers coach with the Rams, who turned around Troy's career. How lucky was Jimmy to stumble into hiring Norv? Seriously, how lucky? Whew. Which brings me to my last Cowboys book, Hell Bent, perfectly titled. The season-long story of how Aikman was trying to get Barry Switzer fired because Barry didn't crack the whip the way Jimmy cracked it. And Switzer and his allies fighting back with all their proud might. Look, here's what I never understood about Troy. And there's a big part of Troy I really like to this day. But this is what hit me hard as I watched the documentary. Why couldn't Troy, as the supposed team leader, see what was going on inside that locker room and get on board with Barry Switzer? Because everyone in that locker room had come to love Barry Switzer, would run through the locker room walls for Barry Switzer. Trust me, you can see it in the documentary. All of them except for the quarterback, who kept losing his mind because Barry wasn't Jimmy. The same Jimmy who once called Troy a loser and who drafted Steve Walsh and who stuck with Steve Berline and who only grudgingly came around to Troy because Norv Turner convinced him to. What? Friends have asked me if Troy had some deep-seated, lingering animosity toward Barry because of what happened when Troy played for Barry at Oklahoma. I really don't think so. Look, Barry tried to fit square peg Troy into his round hole triple option wishbone attack. I mean, Troy was a drop back passer. He just didn't fit in the wishbone. And Troy's leg got broken, ironically, against Jimmy's Miami Hurricanes in Norman fairly early in the year. And Barry eventually got on the phone and found Troy a new drop back passer home with Terry Donahue at UCLA. Barry did that, went way out of his way for Troy. Barry liked Troy. I don't know. Yet, during that 1995 season, Switzer became convinced that Troy was trying to turn 2 key media opinion makers in Dallas, Dale Hansen and Randy Galloway, against Barry. That was very true. So imagine how Barry Switzer felt when Troy had really his 2 worst games of the year, both times against the rival Redskins, who were on their way to finishing 4-12. That's right. The Dallas Cowboys on their way to a Super Bowl championship lost twice that year to the eventual 4-12 Redskins coached by Norv Turner. The coach Troy obviously wanted to replace Barry Switzer. Whew, imagine what Switzer was thinking. It was a long, hard year for Barry Switzer. It took a lot out of him, and it actually took a lot out of me, because was I ever caught in the crossfire between Aikman and Switzer, between the Aikman camp and the Switzer camp, and all their supporters in and around the organization. Their relationship ended over a sideline incident during that second Redskins loss that was at Texas Stadium on December the 3rd, fairly late in the year. Look, I knew Troy could be a hothead. I'd experienced that several times myself, but I had forgotten how Troy could just profusely lose it on the sideline. You can see it in the doc. Man, that sideline footage, I guess from NFL films, some of which I had not seen before. So during that second Redskins loss, Kevin Williams, a little slot receiver and kick returner, didn't run a route the way Troy wanted, a route Kevin Williams hadn't run correctly during what Troy thought was yet another undisciplined Barry Switzer practice. And on the sideline that day, Troy just unloaded on Kevin Williams. And the assistant head coach at the time, John Blake, who was about to become the new head coach at the University of Oklahoma, told Barry Switzer that Troy had just crossed the line. Details are all in my book. And as the doc points out, Switzer had a secretary call Aikman that night, set up a meeting at 9 a.m. in Switzer's office. You can read it in Hellbent. Switzer told Aikman that either Troy was going to apologize to the team when the players came in at noon, or Switzer would apologize for Troy. And as Aikman told me for the book, he just got up and walked out of the office. And as I reported in Hellbent, the quarterback and the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys did not speak a word from December the 4th through the Super Bowl that the Cowboys won in spite of themselves. It was unprecedented, it was unheard of, and it was the truth. Hellbent became a searing psychological study of the internal war between the superstar quarterback who went to high school in Henrietta, Oklahoma, and the legendary Oklahoma coach who so badly wanted that quarterback who played for him in college to love him in Dallas the way every other Cowboy loved Barry Switzer. Whew! Truth. And now it's all there in this documentary. As I said in the doc, Aikman versus Switzer that season became unbearable for that team. Michael and Emmett backed me up on that in the doc. But listen, when Hellbent first came out that July, I got blasted by fans and by media. What? Aikman versus Switzer? They just won the Super Bowl. What are you talking about? Even if some media members knew some of this was going on behind the scenes, none of it had ever been reported, so they all scoffed at and discredited my book, maybe just to save face, their own face. Nobody involved with the Dallas Cowboys has taken anywhere near the criticism that Jerry Jones has, but let me say, I might at least be in Jerry's ballpark for taking heat. God has put me in some great places in my career, but in situations that have fire-tested my faith in God and ultimately my faith in myself. Each time, God has given me the strength to hang in, endure, and each time I have survived and I have prevailed. Thank you, God, for my vision and my courage. It's all from you. And now, thank you for this documentary, for the vindication and the validation. Now, if only Jerry at age 82 could be vindicated and validated by winning one last Super Bowl. That's it for this episode. Thanks to Tyler Korn for producing, to Ernestine for overseeing, and to Hazel for approving.